time to play some Dungeons and Dragons last night. It's a rainy day, it's time to play. This Dungeons and Dragons may give you a fright. It's time to play on this rainy day. Disorganized play, it's GM prep for the rest of us. So join me today, don't let the rain scare you away. It's time for disorganized play. Oh, it's so pleasant and beautiful. Welcome, everyone. Hi, it's Disorganized Play. It's me. I'm your host, Tom Lummel. I am broadcasting to you live from Nerdcore headquarters here. Sorry, just trying to get my eyes around the what our camera setup is like today. Dom has contractors in his house today, in his apartment. Yes, as he's explaining right now. So, it's just me solo here, although Dom is here virtually, if not in person. Luigi is also here, more in person than virtually. That's the story going on behind me. So that's the Buzzaloony. Hey, welcome everyone. Thanks so much for joining me here today. We have kind of a loose schedule. I was going to try and put something together that was a little bit more involved, but I don't know. I don't know if it's this weather or what, but it's just kind of taking the pants off of me. It's taking the pants off of me, and not in a good way. I forgot to tweet, so. You get to listen to me tweet. Forgot to tweet. It's been tweeted. Congratulations. Great. All right. So we just have a few things on the docket today. We're going to do a recap. We're going to talk about giving away all the secrets, and we're going to talk about your game. What's going on in your game? So, yeah, Luigi's very lazy today, which is good. Then he won't be bothering me. I took him out for a little walk in the rain, and he was like, that's not great, so that's enough of that. So, yeah, a very brief, kind of loose framework. So if you have questions about your game or about, what's going on in the campaign or what have you, whatever's on your mind, we're going to have a little sort of just like open chat today for the most part. I do want to recap. I'll get rid of some of these windows just to make my life a little bit happier here online. In fact, I'm going to get rid of all of these windows. Let's make sure I don't eat too much bandwidth here at home. Everything looks good. No dropped frames so far. Yeah, it's that kind of afternoon. So, I do want to recap kind of some of the major events last night. I did think it was it was a successful session in terms of the amount of information that was available to the party. I don't know if it was a successful session in terms of the amount of information that the party got out of the session. And maybe we can talk about that. It's always interesting to me. We've had a couple sessions in a row now where, I don't know if it's in a row, but we've had a couple sessions recently where the party has had the opportunity to kind of ask any question they want and basically get whatever answer that they want. And they really haven't taken advantage of that in what I would consider a significant way, right? Some of that is my own undoing, right? Like they said, well, what's down on Earth? And they say, well, we don't have a lot of details about Earth because we don't go there. I could have probably given them like deck plans, right? I didn't because I wanted them to explore that area, and there's some surprises that I want to still unleash upon them in that area that I think the map would give away. Specifically, if you're looking at the adventure, there's that underwater area that is beneath the island, and I wanted them to find that. I don't know. Maybe in hindsight, it would have been better to say, "Oh, well, there's a place. There's this underwater place under the island." Um, it's one of those push me pull me kind of things, right? If you give them that information, then they feel like, "Well, let's go there. That's the only place we know to go," and it feels a little railroady. If you don't give them that information, then they feel like, "Well, we're going to go to this area and look around and hope that we find something useful." And it's sort of a balance of is it that balance of, do they feel like they're accomplishing something when they're just wandering, versus do they feel like they're being led by their nose to the adventure when they only know one place to go? So I don't know what to do about that. We've only got 3 sessions left, so I don't know what there is to be done about that. But that's an observation that I noticed. Also, one other thing that I noticed from last night is it does not matter. It does not matter what you do in front of the whole party. If you give one person one piece of information, this party will not be loath to share it with anyone else. I gave Garav that manifesto, and he kind of, or the passenger manifest, the crew manifest, he kind of shared it with the rest of the group, probably enough so that Eric knows what's going on. But he largely kind of like, he kept the whole thing to himself, which was interesting, right? I mean, that's within his purview. Like, I want to try and make sure to give each of the players a moment for them to feel something special, and the fact that he has that eye embedded in his head is the best way, the best means I have to exploit him feeling special. But it does it does create a situation where everybody at the table knows what's going on, but they have to pretend that their characters don't know what's going on. Something worth noting, right? I think that's just what the party is. That's kind of what they're geared towards. That's the way these players are. That's all right. Like I said, you take note of it. You then are judicious in your decision whether you're going to drop this on a person or you're going to drop it in front of the whole group or whatever, right? So that's that. That's fine. Um, I really enjoyed the atmosphere and the culture of the doppelgangers. I didn't have a ton of notes. Before I forget, though, speaking of notes and speaking of the crew manifest, if you are a Patreon backer at any level, I have added the crew manifest the into the Patreon folder, the Iron Keep Patreon folder. And Dom can point you at that if you have forgotten where it is and you're a Patreon backer, but you can see that. I just literally put it in there at the top of the stream. That's a PDF that you can, if you want to use it, you want to use it. If you're just curious to look at it, go ahead and look at it. It does have everyone's names, and it was kind of a pain to put together. I decided that most of the passengers on the crew had German sounding names, and so getting a list of like 90 random German names was not as easy as I thought it was going to be. But that's available for you to look at. I'll have another handout next week for you to use. So I did really, like I said, I really enjoyed kind of exploring and depicting the doppelganger culture. I thought that just this whole idea that they don't make noise, right? And the fact that you could use that to explain and depict what was happening in response to this conversation that was happening. They dropped this thing about, oh yeah, we were working with Sebastian to reconnect to the info stream, and the doppelganger's like, oh, and all of a sudden you just hear 15 people all stand up at the same time. Like, to me, that was I don't know how well it played at the table or necessarily on the other side of the screen, but to me, that was a great moment of I'm informing you of what's going on indirectly, right? It's not that he got mad. It's not that he drew weapons. It's not that he threatened them or whatever the case may be. It was legitimately like, oh, okay, he's going to take these actions, and then you're going to notice that there is a response, but you don't have to be involved with it. So I really, I like that piece of it. The fact that everything is so quiet and that there's not, everything is literally unstated, right? That it's mostly just he gives a look to his assistant and his assistant does a thing, and then he just sort of nods and then two people come in. I thought that was fascinating. Boy, I feel like that could be the basis for something more. I don't know what it is, but I enjoyed playing that piece of it. It also was not planned, but it came out a little bit that these particular doppelgangers, if they are even doppelgangers, right? That's the question. Those two things that came out that I thought were very interesting were, one, they don't have any emotions. They don't feel things in the same way that the party does, for sure. Which is a little tricky from a role playing aspect because it makes them very clinical, and everything sort of has the same tone and the same pace and that sort of stuff, and that can get a little monotonous. It's you can fall into a groove with that sort of characterization, right? But um, but that was an interesting thing that I hadn't planned, is that they don't have emotions, and like they're just happy to have consciousness and be people. They don't, and I don't think they even really know that they're supposed to have emotions. And I think part of that is because they've never been imprinted upon by humans, right? And they've observed this, but they don't respond in that particular way, for whatever that means. It also sort of explains why the AIs don't think they have souls, although I don't think that's really. I think the AIs, considering that the clone templates, if you want to call them that, don't have souls, is more of an issue of the AIs basically just being racist. That's really what it comes down to. um, that's my own personal interpretation of it. The second thing that I thought was interesting from their culture, not only do they not have emotions, what was the, I lost the number two. There's definitely a number two. They don't have emotions. Oh, the fact that they're not actually doppelgangers, right? Are they actually doppelgangers? That they don't change when uh, when Eric asked that question. Well, do you change? And they're like, oh well, we get wrinkles around our eyes, and our bodies aren't particularly healthy and whatnot. I thought that was I thought that was a fascinating choice that just sort of occurred to me in the moment. Is that, oh, they don't know that they can do this, and maybe the clone templates on the ship, they don't do that, and it makes sense as like an evolution or whatever. Um, but that was interesting. I think also I wanted to get out there the idea that that the ship is still functioning, that the ship is still traveling, the ship is still thinks it's still on its journey, and maybe I should have gotten that piece of information out there earlier. I honestly thought maybe they would have at some point an encounter with the navigation system, and the navigation system would be like, well, we're still on course. We don't seem to be making a lot of progress, but we're really pouring it to the coals of the engines here, and we're trying to make up time after being sidetracked by encountering that singularity. And the party would be like, what are you talking about? You're not going anywhere. We did have that moment, right? Um, so that was it came about in a different way, but that I think that's a really interesting idea that the ship is still going, even though it's somehow locked into the planet, and it's locked into Faerun, right? Abertoral. Um, a great moment of D&D trivia. What's the name of the planet? Which everyone everyone failed. So, except for those of you in chat. So, a big shout out to James V for being Johnny on the spot with Toral. At any rate, yeah, so I really enjoyed the doppelganger encounter. First of all, from like a framing of where they live, what their lifestyle is like, what their culture is like, what they're like as as this group aboard the ship. Um, yeah, I like that. I like their function within the story as allies. What can we do for you? Let's heal your compatriots. Let's administer as much medical care as we can. That got into kind of an interesting philosophical moment of most of the fantasy characters going, why isn't anybody praying over these people? Because that's how you heal people. And all of the medical people going, we need to spray more, disinfectant on this, and we need to put them in an oxygen tent, and we need to administer these injections and drugs and whatnot. Um, I don't know. It's not necessarily a particularly deft way of handling those issues, but I don't think we're going to do a deep dive on those issues. So, oh, it's been so long since I've joined everyone in a dungeon. I don't even remember how much I can dungeon. So that was good. I think it was good for them to get some equipment fixed, and they didn't ask for that much either. They basically asked for some grenades, and they asked for stuff that they had to get fixed. They didn't ask for any other additional equipment. And to be honest, that's a little bit troubling for me, right? To me, as a DM, I look at that and I go, okay, there's a Boulder Parchment Cheers. Thanks for resubbing up. Hey, you get a free reroll. Let us know who you want that to go to. You can either spend it tomorrow night on Wild Cards, or you can spend it on any of our other games. Just let @SavingThrowShow know who you want to spend it on. I have a couple rerolls from last night that I'm going to carry over to Wednesday because I did not use them. Oh, thank you for the reroll. Appreciate it. Well, I'm coming in with 3. Make a note, Mr. Dom Zook. I'm coming in with 3 next session, so that's cool. And I did see BSB Care's note about the 1d4, rolling the 1d4 for bumps. I think I'm gonna put that one in my back pocket. I'm gonna use that sometime soon. So, at any rate, when the players don't say, well, we need, here, go to the shop and buy whatever you need, if you don't give them a list, which I didn't do, and that would have been a good answer to this. It's like, oh, well, we have the following equipment available. Why don't you may each pick out 2 pieces of equipment, right? That would be a great way to address this situation, where they don't know what to get, what to do, right? Oh, I got killed in the dungeon dive, you guys. Disappointing. So that would be one way to address this thing, is you create a menu for them, and that usually gets players super excited, right? Players are always interested in doing a shopping trip, but if you want to put some constraints around it, that helps keep it from either turning into everybody sitting around staring at each other like, I don't know, what do you need? What do you want? What do you think? That's the one hand. Or the other hand is they open up the player's handbook and they just start going wild on like, oh, wait a minute. So we can buy anything of like uncommon, rarity or less. Great. And then they start looking through the DMG, and it turns into this long kind of, them trying to min max what they, what their items would be and whatnot. For their money. Well, how much money do we have? And then it turns into the loot list review, where they've forgotten about their money for literally like 5 sessions. And then you say, okay, well, you can go shopping and buy anything of uncommon or lower. And they go, well, how much money do we have? Because why don't we buy? Okay, I've got an idea. If we can afford 50 healing potions, let's buy, or whatever it is. So those are sort of the 2 extremes, and I think the best way to mitigate those 2 circumstances is to give them a limited menu and say, here's what's available. They're willing to give you 1 item each from this list, or 2 picks from this list of less important things, and 1 pick each from this list of major items, right? But you got to split it up. that always gets into a little bit weird thing where somebody goes, I don't need anything, so why don't I pick something out for one of you guys and I'll give it to you. But it is a much better situation than just spending literally 90 minutes of everybody staring at the book and looking and trying to figure out, well, couldn't we have sold, what about that pair of candlesticks that we found in the temple? Remember back at the, and you're like, no, I don't remember. You just start flipping through your notes. What do you remember what you fought when you got this? Blah, 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 blah. Um, those shopping trips can be very amorphous and weird and cause you to go back through a bunch of bookkeeping that you honestly, like, personally, I have no interest in doing. I'm not a dungeon accountant and I just don't care. Um, but then they ask, like, don't you remember we got this thing? And it's like, I remember, but you've forgotten too. So clearly it was not significant enough. Maybe the dick answer is, oh, it wasn't significant enough for you to remember it, and it's not significant enough for me to remember it, so your character lost it in the course of their travels. That's punishing the character for being attached to a bad player, but that is one possible answer. I don't necessarily recommend that, but it is one way that occurs to me that's like, how could we get out of this situation? Well, that would be one way that we could get out of this situation. So they didn't. I think just to reiterate the point, when they were given this shopping opportunity, they said we don't really need anything. He wants his power armor fixed. She wants some more grenades. We want our walkie-talkies fixed. That was it. And what that's an indication of, the reason that's troubling for me is they don't know what's coming next, and they don't know how to prepare for what's coming next. And both of those things are on me to some extent because I haven't telegraphed a bunch of signals about what's coming next. Although I think I've been fairly clear, like, you're going to go to engineering at some point. You're going to have to journey into hell. Ostensibly, there's going to be radiation there. You didn't really ask for any, but they're not going there next. They're going to Earth next. Okay. And I think they assume that they can go back to the doppelgangers. They're going to have to go back to the doppelgangers to collect Avril's parents, right? So that's fine. We can give them more information and kind of get them prepped. The flip side of it is they haven't asked for any information about hell. They don't really seem concerned. They feel like they're equipped to handle it, or they'll just go into it the way they go into everything and just kind of deal with the circumstances as they come. So I think some of my frustration is like, some of it is on my own shoulders because I haven't been foreshadowing heavily enough for this group for them to understand where they're headed and what they're facing and allow them to make some intelligent choices about that. I think some of it is also just an issue that they feel competent, and so they've been able to deal with everything that they've been able to deal with. They don't need to ask a bunch of questions. They feel like they're the heroes who are here to take care of business. Okay, they're competent. They're not planners, right? So that's something that I just need to accept, is that this group is not planners. I gave them a whole map to look at and plan a strategy for, and they didn't. And I've done that I've kind of done that twice, and then in this last session, I gave them kind of carte blanche to ask any questions that they want about how the ship worked and and they went so far with it, right? So it's one of those things where it's always a battle of managing how you think things are going to go and what the inherent implications are of the situation that you set up. In this case, I gave them allies that knew the ship on a very intimate level in terms of how it was functioning and what's going on in the ship and who the inhabitants are and what the struggles are and whatnot. And I thought, oh, this will be an opportunity for them to really grill this guy and get a lot of information about what's going on. That was my assumption about how things were going to play out. It did not, in fact, play out that way. And then you got to adjust to the circumstances. So I do think in that respect, like I was fairly good at being proactive in terms of sharing information, right? And telling them, okay, well, there were a couple of great reveals last night. Sebastian is in fact a problem, and he used them, and he's going to try and take over the ship thanks to their help, and that puts the doppelgangers in a bad place. And there's this war going on between heaven and earth, and earth keeps trying to like you know, push up, push up creatures or whatever. Um, I think we can dungeon every 30 minutes, Uncle Dave, if you are curious. It's either every 30 minutes or every 2 hours. Dom knows that. Yeah, every hour or so. So maybe the stream will go that long. We'll see. What's up? Welcome, that gay ginger. Good to see you. So I thought that was successful in terms of sharing. Here's what's going on the ship. We think we're still traveling. We're your allies. We have resources. There are limited resources, etc. And then we got into the first level of Earth, right? Which was very kind of brief and perfunctory, but we didn't have a lot of time left, and I didn't want to start a combat not with like 20 minutes to go. That seemed unnecessary and cruel, and we can save that for the beginning of next session or whatever. So I was happy with where we ended. Not particularly entranced with the old school nature of this module in terms of there's no descript. Like, I know everybody complains about boxed text, but boxed text gives you at least a set of sentences or descriptive elements that you can work off of, even if you choose. You can choose to ignore it. I mean, there's two options together, right? That you can choose to uh, read it word for word and just plow through it. You can choose to ignore it altogether. I think the happy medium is you look at it, you paraphrase pieces of it, you give them as much as their attention demands, and that's that. But at least it gives you as the DM something to start with, right? There's something that you can convey. You know what's appropriate to convey to the players up front, as opposed to trying to make decisions of, should I tell them this? Does this give something away? Like when you're just reading the room description as one block, there's stuff in there for the GM that's mixed in, like robots appear here 50% of the time. Okay, all right, I don't want to tell them that. Boulder Parchment Shears raises an interesting point. Do you feel like the party is working too hard to not metagame? It feels like sometimes they're working too hard at being fair to you. There was a little bit of that last night, and I wasn't sure if it was them not trying not to metagame or them just running bits of like, what do you mean the world is round? And I'm willing to play that game to a certain extent. I wouldn't be terribly upset if they, shorthanded some of that information. I think the danger there is not so much a danger that's at the table, but it's actually a danger between us and the audience, which is, yeah, I want to be careful about repeating a bunch of stuff that the players already know and that the audience already knows, right? Like, so prime example of that last night was one of the natural questions for Alaris to ask was, you come from a world? What is your world like? The problem with that is the players already know what the world is like, and you all on the other side of the internet already know what the Forgotten Realms is like. You've watched us play through it for 6 months or whatever. So answering that, like getting in a situation where you're answering those types of questions, even though like on a metagame level, or even though in fiction it makes sense, and you want to try not to metagame too much, like Eric gave the right amount of answers of like, it's beautiful. There's light and darkness and grass and trees and fields and jungle and weather and rain and snow and the moon and da. It's great. And that's as much as we needed. Yeah, I agree with Class Dots. Like it was concise, and it also conveyed everything that was different about the ship, right? I will say that was one of the things that was also, I thought there were a ton of thematic issues that got hammered on in this last session, right? The the whole idea that the ship is actually a mirror of heaven and earth and the three hells is actually a mirror of what the cosmology that you have in your world. And this kind of all of these parallels of the people on the ship might just be the gods, and the doppelgangers seem like maybe they're gods to the veggie and maybe you're just sort of like a veggie kind of version of whatever. I thought there were a ton of those kind of ideas that really got set up. Those themes got either, I hate to say it this late date, introduced or reinforced very heavily. Like it gave the players a new perspective, hopefully, on how they view their world and how they view what's happening in the world of the ship. So that I don't know. Those are sort of, I don't like to make my campaigns about reaching definitive conclusions about high-minded philosophical principles, right? That's fine if that's your ambition. I I feel uncomfortable making those sorts of, like, making the outcome to be a particular judgment about something. I also like to have these issues come up in a more organic way than having them like baked in up front, right? Um, that like right up front, it turns out like religion is a sham and technology is just a placeholder for magic. Admittedly, that's sort of put into the that's put into the core premise of the adventure, but it wasn't something that, like, the difference between healing with religion and healing with technology was not something that I wanted to highlight right up front, kind of chisel into stone and go, this is what this campaign is about. I didn't want to do that. Um, but I do like that these ideas kind of come up and they provide these sort of like, I guess, prompts for discussion or moments of reflection that are there, but they don't have to be resolved, right? We don't have to resolve. I think we are going to get to the answer of like, who are the gods? Um, who's Torm? Torm has left the ship. What does that mean? I think we're moving towards an answer on that. Um, but I don't think we're going to come to a philosophical judgment on healing with religion and healing with magic or technology. One is better than the other, right? I don't think we're going to get there. Um, but there were a lot of those issues, that those issues were brought in. They prompted a moment for you to pause and reflect and consider or whatever. The issues of identity are really kind of coming to the fore in this thing, and I think those things are intriguing and exciting. Does it necessarily have to be something that we resolve in a particular way, or that I have a definitive answer about? No. And that is always a little dodgy, right? Like you can kind of stray into some problematic territory if you don't have uh, at least careful consideration of how those issues are being treated. Um, you know, you also have to meet the players on whatever level they're willing to meet in terms of what kind of heavy issue type of consideration do they want to play with, right? Are they really interested in getting into kind of the ethics of this thing, or do they just want to kind of have a casual game and play some D&D, and if it comes up, it prompts a moment of thought, and they pause and reflect on it and get whatever enjoyment or stimulation they can, intellectual stimulation they can out of it. Then we move on to the next, room full of goblins or whatever it is. That's fine too. All of those things are those are all okay. So you have to meet them on that level. I think it's as a DM, it's tough to force that stuff down players' throats. I for one, as a player, kind of like push back on that. Um, if they engage with it, then you have to kind of like let them engage and toy with it in a way that they find interesting and playful and fun. So, at the same time, trying to be respectful of those issues, or at least have some tenderness and consideration with how they're handled, right? Because you can oftentimes have people just sort of go off the cliff of like, wouldn't it be cool to be like, what if elves were really racist? And I will say, like, I in a home game once, I played a character who was like sort of this master swordsman who was revered throughout the land for his ability to wield a blade, and then it just happened that he was really racist against goblins, and that can get out of hand pretty quickly, right? You have to be careful with that. Um, that's all I really need to say about that. I don't want to go into that whole campaign or whatever, but it was a character choice. The other thing you can keep in mind about these types of things, right, is you can always have your character grow, evolve, make a different choice, or even retcon your character so that they're not like that. Oh, it might be fun to do that. Oh, it turns out it makes you feel really gross. Okay, all right, well, let's get rid of that. So it's a fiction that we are both participating in and have ownership over. So uh, take ownership of it. Lots of stuff. Yeah, Beacon, MSC, welcome. Um, yeah, that was revealed at in this like in the season finale of last season when they went to the Palace of Mirrors. That got revealed, and I think Grayson always knew that, and I always knew that. Like Eric and I had talked about it, but but I think obviously the players had forgotten about it, even though they had seen the vision that 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 Grayson had asked about. So yeah, that was interesting that his parents were doppelgangers. I mean, it's I don't know that started to turn into a weird conversation of like, are doppelgangers born or how do they reproduce? And it's like I don't need these details. It's not interesting to me. It only leads to kind of a very weird and distracting conversation that doesn't have any meaningful outcome. Those ecology of type of exercises and articles can be interesting reading for a DM or as a player, but I don't think they make an interesting play experience for like, let's really hash out how the biology of this works. Then it just turns into my my made up choices are more rational than your made up choices because of X, Y, and Z thing, which honestly doesn't have anything to do with anything. So I think those sorts of discussions are dangerous. I always thought they actually reproduced by sort of like budding or something like that. Like I don't know. Again, my opinion matters just as little as the player's opinion does about it. I don't really care. It is an interesting role playing consideration or a bit of backstory when you go, oh, his parents are also doppelgangers, and they were also far more free about being whoever they wanted to be. They would switch husband and wife roles all the time. Again, those issues of identity now start coming up, right? Fairly fascinating. So, just to round off the recap here, um, wow, been gabbing about it a lot. So, to round off the recap, I am a little frustrated with the old school nature of the adventure that does not give you a set of at least kind of descriptive elements that you can just pull right away, just instantly quick reference. And I may have to either write some, I mean, at a minimum, I have to write some notes. I may have to straight up write some discussion or some descriptions of probably 4 areas within the Earth level, the Earth deck, that I can just sort of spout at them so that it is what it is, right? So I don't have to kind of like read the entry, digest it, reinterpret it, give them the, okay, here's what you actually see type of version of that thing. Some people would call that doing some prep work. Class Dunce asked the question, was it being a doppelganger Eric's idea? So, the origin of this, just to give you a brief backstory, is we did a one-shot that was run by Havana. If you go back on YouTube or into our VODs, you can see that there is a one-shot where the kids we go back to the day. I actually played Havana's character. I played Avril. And yeah, it was a flashback episode where the characters were all teenagers at a summer camp. And the summer camp, doppelgangers had infiltrated the summer camp and they murdered one of the camp counselors. And there's more to it, but in the final confrontation, the party fought either one or two doppelgangers in their lair, and one of the doppelgangers grabbed Grayson and was grappling with him and fighting him, and started to take on Grayson's appearance and was like, I'm the real Grayson. And Grayson was like, no, I'm the real Grayson. And then they killed one of them, and that was the end of the story, right? And later, I had said to Eric, I was like, I'm brainstorming kind of, like, I'm looking for ideas of, ways to explore the story and whatnot. And what if at some point, it turns out that your character didn't actually survive the doppelganger attack, that you were the doppelganger. And he was the one who came up with the idea of, like, what if I was a doppelganger the whole time? Like, the reason it attacked me is because I was also a doppelganger. I think that's how the conversation went down. Anyway, that's how the idea got introduced, that his character was a doppelganger. And when we sat on it, we hid it from everybody else in the group. And then at some point, I don't remember who it was, but somebody used basically like an anti-magic ray on Grayson, and his features melted away. And everybody's like, what is happening? It was a great reveal. So it was not my idea. It was, or not solely my idea. It was an idea that Eric and I had agreed upon and worked out behind the scenes. But it was inspired by that flashback episode that we did. Yeah, it might have been Moonbeam, could have been something like that. Yeah, that was a confrontation with Gulthius, who revealed his true nature. Oh, Gulthius, what a dick. So yes, that is correct, Thomas W. Young. Thank you. So that's the backstory on that. I don't have a whole lot else I want to talk about last night's episode, other than the fact that on the calendar we have 3 episodes left. I don't know if we'll have to go one bonus one to wrap some things up or not. I do want to have probably a little conclave with the players and say, all right, we got 3 episodes left. Is there anything major that your character wants to fulfill or whatever? And is there any big moment, as we're leading up to sort of our season finale, that you give me some possibilities for things that you think might be cool, right? So I'll probably reach out to the players for that, because that's the way. 4 episodes, says the almighty Mr. Zook. Is that my calendar disagrees? Am I wrong? April 18th. So where are we? We got the 28th, the 4th, the 11th, and the 18th. I guess you're right. It's 4 episodes. Well, we may get there. All right. So moving on to our next quick topic here, which is pretty is a short one. So one of the things that I did, as I was feeling the time crunch of our number of available sessions collapsing in front of me, right? Is I've talked about this before, where when you start a campaign, you just start putting pylons in the river, and then you see where the characters walk, and you start building the bridge in that direction, whichever path they may follow. But at some point, you get 2/3 of the way across the river, and you can't just put pylons in any direction. You have to start funneling them toward the other side, toward the conclusion of the arc, right? So as I was looking toward, okay, what do I have? What sort of stuff do I have floating out there, and how do I want to start narrowing it down? I basically did just sort of a very crass kind of, here's a bunch of different elements that need to be revealed that I know that are in my brain that need to be revealed. And let's just put them on the board and start kind of knocking some of them off. Let's get them introduced. Let's make the players aware of them. Let's bring them into the consciousness. Let's bring them onto the plot radar board, and stop having kind of have to stop having things that are vaguely defined. You have to start giving them specific things that they now can take and manipulate and put together into a solution and a climax, right? So I just did I like to take a big piece of paper and write a bunch of crap on it and put boxes around it and try and put, links between it and whatnot. So I did that. And then this morning I went through, one of my goals yesterday was, I was looking at this piece of paper and I'm like, I want to get as much of this stuff off of my secrets board, right? I basically put together, I don't know, and a different way to describe it would be like, this is our campaign secrets board. This is our adventure secrets board. These are the things that are remaining to be discovered in our game, right? And I looked at it and it's this big list of different things. And last night I was like, there's a lot of adventure ahead of us, but we don't have a lot of direction in our adventure. And I think in order to bring this thing to a satisfying conclusion, we need to start resolving all of the things that are either unstated or unresolved, right? We've talked about this before. But I was like, instead of focusing on what monsters are where and what equipment they could have and how this, stuff would play out, I was like, let's try and eliminate as many of those elements that are lurking at this point. So I went through this morning and I went hard on that during the game, and then I went through this morning and I checked off everything that was mentioned and introduced last night or even addressed, right? And so I've blotted out a few things that still have yet to be. There's 3 things that have yet to be resolved, but so if we look at this, everything with a check mark next to it, I could have taken a picture, I guess. It's bad lighting, whatever. But the important thing is, that's not bad. The important thing is check mark, 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 right? So, Sebastian is killing organic life. Info stream reconnection, that's checked off. Every 66 cycles, there's a purge that is tied into the nanite curse. Those things are checked off. The ship is burning fuel out of control and the reactor is on overload. Check, check, check. There's power being funneled to the antenna array. Check, check, check. The crew or survivors are somehow related to the gods. Check. There's time dilation in regards to the prime material plane. We got that. Doppelgangers are clone bodies. There are clones that are now independent doppelgangers. That was taken care of. Owls are sleeves for the crew. Check, 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 right? So there's a couple things on here, like how do they get off the ship and how is Xanathar going to get his revenge and whatnot, that aren't introduced, haven't been introduced. They have to think about it, obviously, but like a path forward hasn't been given for that. But considering, I've got 4 things on my board, 5 things on my board that I didn't introduce. I've got 5, 7, 9, 12 things that I checked off last night. That's pretty good, 12 to 5. So out of 17 things, I took care of 2/3 of them, right? That makes me feel pretty good, right? And yeah, as BSB Care points out, like there's actually 4 sessions left, but it's time to edit things down and get things resolved, right? Yeah, it is way more sci-fi than even the original adventure is, but that actually sparks a lot of inspiration in my brain. I'm a big sci-fi fan, so I like creating that atmosphere, and it's a welcome change. I get it, Smokebeard, if that's not your particular preference or style. That's cool. It is a welcome change for me from constantly creating a series of dank dungeons that are filled with moss and and where only undead have tread for the past 120 years or whatever. Like there's some things about the fantasy genre where this is, for me, this feels like a nice switch up, right? Like it's a world of possibilities where I'm not beholden to some sort of like age old tropes. And also I feel like, if I rip something off from Aliens and put it into this game, I can describe it through a fantasy filter that makes it still feel somewhat interesting and compelling. Whereas if I rip off something from Lord of the Rings and put it in my fantasy game, everybody goes, dude, you stole that from Lord of the Rings. That sucks. Um, so yeah, I mean, I wouldn't want to take D&D characters and make them live in a campaign in this world. To me, what's really interesting actually about this particular adventure that we're running is that it is a clash of cultures of what if these people who have a very good understanding and a fairly good competence with the systems and magic of their fantasy world intersect with robots and docking bays and nuclear reactors and clones and whatnot, and how do those things come together, and what's the tension between them, and how do they get like refiltered and whatnot. um, so so I wouldn't want to run a campaign in this world unless I was running like a sci-fi campaign or something like that. But it is a compelling kind of like, it's a visit to a foreign land, and it makes my GM brain kind of spin up of like all the different possibilities of all this stuff could be. It does honestly make me question, like, should I be running a Gamma World type of game or something like that, or more of a science fiction campaign? Would that be something I don't want to run for my next campaign? But I don't know what the answer is to that. But it's been inspiring for me as a GM. Has it been as successful with the players? I don't know. Like I think Eric is enjoying now his power armor that gives him +4 to strength and whatnot. But I don't think it's been, a lot of the technology has been hamstrung. I don't know if it's been as successful with the players as it's been engaging for me. I think another issue that's happening is that we have four different kind of plot hooks for each of the players. So at some point, Thawne wants to get revenge and cure his dad. Avril wants to get her parents and get revenge on Xanathar. Uh, Eric wants to resolve the question of what's Grayson's humanity. Ava wants to find a sacred vessel for Basharla and bring Basharla back into the world. Right? Those things are all. Those are their individual goals, and other than revenge on Xanathar, which is their sort of overarching goal, they don't really tie together very nicely or integrate very cleanly. And I don't think that has been as successful as it could have been. I think I could have done a better job of like pulling those strings together. As it is now, it feels like, well, we need to go get the God's Fire because we've been told to do that. So that's kind of a perfunctory goal. And somehow there's going to be a sacred vessel for Basharla, but we don't know how to get that or what's going to happen with that. So we're just going to kind of keep wandering around until we get to the God's Fire. And the motivations that the characters have exist, but they don't have a strong plan behind them for execution. And I suspect that's a vacuum of information that's partly to blame. So I don't feel like it's been super successful on that particular front, and that's a lesson for me to take forward. And we'll see what happens after this. I would love to introduce Githyanki after this module. That BSB cares like that. That sounds like super fun. Um, when I look at the Fiend Folio, I literally can't stop staring at the original cover of the Fiend Folio because of the Githyanki, and like they were such an interesting race to me. It was such compelling material that I would love to do something with them. I haven't decided what's going to come after this campaign. We do 4 sessions and we're going to take a break, and who knows what we'll come back with on the other side of that break. I'm sure we'll make some changes with things. Um, but I haven't put any thought into what do I want to run and how do I, what's the next leg of this campaign? Is the next leg of this campaign a continuation of these characters? I don't know. Is it do we do it kind of like it's truly like the the Iron Keep Chronicles where we pick up a a new set of characters who are related to the Iron Keep, who maybe live in Oakhurst and know of these characters or whatever. Like, I think it would be interesting. We've played these characters for almost a year, right? To kind of scrub the board clean and get a new set of challenges in front of us, but that's tied into sort of the same world, right? So, yes, DJ Regular, I share that same nostalgia. Although I think I sort of disagree that it's not just nostalgia. I think the Githyanki and the Githzerai were described with enough of a backstory and enough dynamic, interesting hooks attached to them that it really prompted you to think about like, wow, what are these creatures like? And what would it be like to fight them? And what's their culture like? And where do they come from? And how do they live? And, they lived in such an alien place, and they had such dogged devotion. Like, we're going to track down if you get one of our swords, we will track you down. We will ride dragons into your house and we'll destroy you. Right. So that's that's I think nostalgia is a strong factor there, but there's a bunch of other things in that book which have a nostalgia value for me, like Nilbogs, which doesn't have the same kind of enduring, inspiring quality that Gith Zerai and Githyanki do. Yeah, oh, we definitely need to tie. I mean, my goal is to tie up all the loose ends that I've mentioned by the end of this arc of the adventure, right? And like, I think we need to have a scene with Thawne's dad. I think we do need to have a confrontation with Xanathar. Maybe Gingy has to be either involved in the redemption or redeemed somehow. It's a great question. The one saving grace to all of this is because of the time dilation effect, we have the opportunity to really shake up like what's awaiting them on the other side of this whole experience, right? So we don't have to go directly from like Xanathar has set up a war camp and is just waiting outside the gate to pounce on them. There could be a whole different set of circumstances because time has passed. At this point, we have to assume if 10 days is 20 some years, they've been in there for at least 2 days, right? So that's 2 or 3 years. Okay. I mean, that's a significant amount of time. Uh, so I think we can set those elements up and get some resolution on that stuff. And if we wanted to, like bookmark this thing as uh, this is where we shift into a whole new set of characters, I think we'll have that opportunity. So that is that. Is there anything else I wanted to say about the game or the campaign? And while I'm thinking about that, we will take some. Yeah, 4 years. 4 years ish is even better, right? Um, I will take some of your general RPG questions. We'll do about, I don't know. I think maybe we'll do half an hour here on this, like till 3:30 Pacific time, if there's enough questions. If you have a question about your game or something that came up, start feeding them into the chat and we'll address it. Um, Other than that, 4 sessions left. I think we have a reasonable amount of time to get where we want to go, and yeah, yeah. I don't know what's where we're gonna go with this. Yeah, it could be. I mean, it is in fact possible that maybe it's been 25 years for the two of them, or 20 some years for the two of them, but the time dilation effect is completely random, right? Who knows? I think there's also an opportunity to give them some control over this, like make the God's Fire have a payoff so that if they manipulate the God's Fire in a particular way, they can actually like fast forward or reverse time or change the amount of time that has flowed past around them, etc. Hmm. Yeah, I think the the Githyanki and their psionics and cutting the silver cord and all that kind of stuff. It's just it was such a great it was such an original take on a fantasy culture that was not beholden to some sort of Conan or Tolkien reference or whatever. It was not pulled out of Thomas Covenant or Wizard of Earthsea or whatever. It really felt like an original sci-fi concept, and I think it was pretty cool. It would be interesting if they went back in time and built the Iron Keep, right? I think we've already kind of had some spoilers on who may have built that, but maybe I'm wrong. We visited with a very powerful mage who had built at least one extra dimensional structure. Maybe he didn't build just one. So, yeah, at this point, if you have questions about the other questions about the game, or you have questions about something that's going on in your game, I'm happy to entertain them. So go ahead and throw those things over. I do want to reinforce that if you're a Patreon backer, I have uploaded the entire crew manifest. It's a one-page document, so it's not like it's huge. But that crew manifest that I shared last night in the game is now in the Patreon folder, so you can indulge in that and take a look at that. So uh, that's um, that's there for your enjoyment. And like I said, I'll probably have another handout for you next week. Although the advantage to some of this the advantage to having clues that remain unresolved is you can arrive at different answers as the game goes along, and I'm really seeing the benefits of that as we get um, closer and closer and closer. And Wugget is not on on the character or on the crew manifest. That would have been a terrific that would have been a terrific inside baseball kind of joke. But I was under the gun when I put that thing together. I started putting together my handouts like around 5:30 or something like that, and I got into the weeds on making my handouts. And honestly, like, it was incredibly stressful for me to come into the game last night. I was not sure exactly how I wanted to play some things out. I will talk about one other topic while things are kind of people are mulling things over in the chat, right? And that is last night you saw me take narrative control away from the players for some brief instances, right? So I very definitely commandeered what was happening in the game and turned it into third person narration. Oh, okay, you want to go retrieve your mom? They send a detail of 4 doppelgangers with you and Grace, and you up there, you find her, you have this momentary interaction with her. Then on your way back, you come across a detail of 3 security bots and get into a firefight. And you and 2 of the doppelgangers get away, but the other 2 doppelgangers are left behind, and you don't ever see them again. So, traditionally in D&D, what you should do is let the party roll for initiative, figure out how they want to play out this firefight, all that kind of stuff. Roll their hits, how they run away, disengage, all that kind of garbage, right? I didn't want to take that time. And basically I just rolled some dice to say, okay, does this, to steal from Powered by the Apocalypse, is it a 10 plus, you get exactly what you want the way that you want? Is it a 7 to 9 where there's a mixed result? Or is it a 6 and below where bad things happen? And I knew that, the bad result here couldn't be really bad, right? It couldn't be the mom gets killed, or the party doesn't make it back, or the party's cut off and they need a rescue. Because I didn't want to spend time backtracking that way. And I didn't want to punish the party for splitting up. And I wanted to make the point that there was a price to be paid, but ultimately everyone is reunited, right? Because I need that with 4 sessions left, I can't take that. I don't have the luxury of carving up that much time dedicated to combat and teaching them a lesson about splitting up the party and why not. So instead, that's what I decided was okay. They they get into a fight, but those two doppelgangers are essentially dead or sacrificed or captured or whatever it is. Okay. Well, they paid a price. It wasn't a significant price to them that they know of right now, but there were several moments right at the top. You saw, oh, you need to rescue someone. I'm going to dispatch some people. They went, they took care of it. When we got in there, and Tobias is, has been undergone this weird medical sacrifice procedure, right? Okay. That was taking narrative control away from them. And like BSB Care points out, like there are points where players looked like, oh, we're going to roll for initiative for this, right? Nope, 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 nope. I got to keep things moving. And a big part of that was I can't get 12 things knocked off the board if I spend 45 minutes in a combat where ultimately they're going to survive, or that doesn't have such a significant outcome that it's that I don't want to give it the kind of significant outcome where it could majorly change the entire course of the adventure. If I was playing in a home game where it's like, yeah, we're going to just keep playing till it reaches its natural conclusion and we have room to explore those types of things, maybe that's fine. I think you have to look at the pacing of your game, and is it rising? Is the action getting the drum beat getting faster and players are getting more invested and excited for the upcoming climax? Have they been handed like a win, a win, a win, and maybe it's time to give them a setback and a loss? Or have they been losing, 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 and you need to hand them a win? Like, those are two factors that you really need to weigh in your own game, even if you don't have a set end date for when this adventure arc is supposed to wrap up. But those two moments are key issues of what anybody on Reddit would fairly and rightfully say were railroading. They still worked, right? I didn't make the characters look like idiots. That's the number one thing about railroading, is when the DM makes the characters, forces them to make dumb decisions or makes them look dumb or careless or stupid. Even if the players actually are somewhat careless and reckless and do things that are kind of stupid, when they initiate it on their own, that's their problem. They have ownership of it. But when you railroad them into actions where it's like, well, you guys never planned anything, so what happens is you go through this door and you get jumped by 4 security robots, they go, well, wait a minute, we probably would have planned. They're going to fight you on that, right? So that's, I said this the other day, but that's the difference between bad railroading and then just taking the narrative reins in order to tidy up some loose ends that need to be addressed but aren't the main source of your driving plot, right? Or at least not the main path or avenue of your driving plot. Yes, part of their goal is to do a rescue mission and rescue Avril's parents. But we're setting them up for a much more climactic scene of that than this kind of like minor backtrack where half the party stays back at the base camp and doesn't even participate in going and picking her up, right? So I think if you look at the issues of pacing and the issues of the amount of information that I needed to introduce in order to get the rest of the adventure arc moving, you can go, all right, I understand why he did that. I understand why he took those moments. And the most important consideration is not making your players look foolish, making them look like the competent heroes that they are, painting them in the way that the players appreciate and understand what happened with those characters when you're taking that sort of license with their ability to act independently within the world, right? Just a little side note, because it came up, it's come up recently on Twitter, and it came up last night in the game of like, I'm literally like, I'm going to tell you what happens with your characters in this situation. And sometimes it's good and sometimes it's bad. I have mixed feelings about when I say stuff like, well, it's very isolating that they don't ever talk. Well, you're making a decision for the characters. Some characters might go, oh, I find it really peaceful and refreshing. I want to learn how to master this telepathy. So I am putting words in their mouth. At that point, it's a little dodgy, um, but I don't think it's not a huge imposition on them. But when you really, really are literally taking over their actions and narrating what happens to them without giving them any input, then you have to be careful. All right. Thomas W. Young does have a question. I was playing in a D&D group. Our DM moved away after we finished Lost Mine of Phandelver. If I were to take over as DM, and I've never DM'd before, what would be a good place to start? Nobody in chat has chimed in yet, even though this question has sat out there for a little bit. So that's interesting question. My question to you would be, what level are your characters? Are you going to continue with the same party, or are you going to start over from scratch? Is the question. I think you should probably be somewhere between like 5th and 7th level when you get done with that adventure and you have a few interesting magic items. Um, but tell me where you're at with your group. I think. Hmm. Around 4th level. Look, my answers are also suspect, right? You're certainly free to disagree with me, and hopefully I've been completely upfront with you that part of this whole show is I make mistakes and I look back on the mistakes that I've made and I go, well, and today you've even seen it, like, I don't know that this is working, I don't know whether these things are set up, and here's what I'm trying to do to adjust, right? So, Dungeon Master, we're all only level 3, right? Here's what I am going to suggest, which is I think a little bit off the beaten path. But my question to you is, a follow-up question is, what did your group enjoy about Lost Mines of Phandelver, right? Did they like the role playing? Did they like the combat? What was there, unraveling the mystery of the map and the mines and whatnot? Was that exciting? Like, was there what sort of play style is your group attuned to or inspired by? Like, what hooks them into the game of D&D, right? That's one question that I would ask. But let me. There'll be some change of players. That's fine. I think my answer on this is going to be somewhat unconventional, right? And hopefully it's not too unconventional, but the standard answer would be, I don't know. Yeah, you can see some of grab Tomb of Annihilation or something like that and play that, right? Grab one of the hardback adventures and play that. That would be the standard answer. I'm not going to give you the standard answer because as a first-time DM, I don't think that's a good idea for you. I don't think, and especially with a fairly new group, I don't think you're set up for success. And the other, for a couple of reasons, right? Let me give you what my thinking on that is. The plot in a 256-page book is enormous and sprawling. And even if it starts at about 5th level, so you're about the right level for it, it's a lot of information for you as a DM to digest. Honestly, I think it's probably too much, right? So, that you don't complicate your life by taking this burden on of like, oh yeah, so there's and all right, so there's this attack on Nightstone, and then there's a overland travel chapter, and there's a But before that, then they go to one of these three different cities, and there's another attack there. But then they go to this place and unlock. Like those are all very big, sprawling plot lines, and I think it's just too much material for you to digest and assimilate and integrate into whatever pleases your group. Curse of Strahd is a little bit more streamlined than Storm King's Thunder. I don't know. I can't recommend it to you because of the amount of material that you have to digest and the potential length of the play experience. Right. The problem with grabbing a book like that is if you're not ready to run it and you don't know what about it is going to appeal to your players, you're committed to running this thing for basically a year. That's how long it takes to get through one of the hardbacks, in my opinion, if you're going to run it at home, right? If you're going to kind of speed run it, you can get by in like 4 to 5 months if you do some judicious editing. But that's probably beyond your competence right now. It's not something that you're going to feel super comfortable doing. So don't put yourself in that position where we all need to commit to the next year of this campaign, and I'm going to try and slog my way through it the best that I can. I don't think that's smart. Those are the two factors: is the amount of material that's involved, the amount of finesse that's involved to get your players snapped into the storyline. In some respects, or at least the experience of knowing I could cut some of this stuff, right? The problem with a published adventure is, as a new DM, you think, well, this has been play tested and it's been thought through, and the encounters have a flow and they make sense. And that's only partially true, right? It's only true to a certain extent. And the dirty secret for all of us DMs with experience under our belts is we're used to taking the material and instinctively, or based on our experience, cutting, editing, revising, reshaping, pushing in a new direction, etc. Right? And as a new DM, you're not going to have that same experience eye for looking at what needs to go where and what needs to be slotted in, replaced, pushed away, cut down, compressed. But also, even if you do make some of those decisions, you're not going to have the confidence to say, oh yeah, okay, yeah, that makes sense. I feel good about this, right? You're going to be second guessing yourself a lot. So the amount of material, the amount of time, and the editing ability that you need to develop as a DM the requirements are just too high to run a hardback adventure. And as you point out, a year is too much commitment. Like, you might have to move, you might not want to, whatever, right? Yeah, you could look at one of the old school modules, right? Honestly, I don't think Tales of the Yawning Portal is a great alternative for you. BSB Care brings it up as an option because it is a series of standalone adventures that have been updated to 5e, right? But they are old school adventures that have been updated to 5e, except for what is the Vault of the Draco Lich or whatever, which was really basically sort of run as sort of a playtest kind of showcase event. But they're all pretty meat grindery dungeons, and they don't have a lot of juice to them in terms of the storyline and whatever, right? So, guess what? Who'd asked for it? Somebody had said they want a dungeon again. Let's dungeon, guys. Dungeon. Help me out. So, I don't think Tales from the Yawning Portal it's too old school, right? We've talked about it on the stream before in terms of, and even with Expedition to the Perrier Peaks, we've seen where your 1337 is the most that you can dungeon Thomas W. DeYoung. You can't do 2000. I don't think that works anymore. So keep that in mind. You have to put some number between 1 and 1337. Those adventures are really designed around you want to go on an adventure because you want loot and you want to kill monsters, and it's that simple, right? It's that straightforward. There's not a lot of nuance to it, and there's not a lot of story hooks to it, and there's not a lot of reason why things are there. And that's the problem that you're going to be facing as a new DM if you go through the Adventures and Tales from the Yawning Portal. Is a lot of times you'll be going, "What? Why are these two ogre magi even in this room? Like, what do they do when they're not in the room? What? What's? What is this room, right?" And back in the day, back in the 80s, you didn't really need an answer for that. The answer was they're there to be killed, and they're there to deliver treasure rewards and XP and help you level up. And that was sort of a goal in and of itself. But at this point, getting XP is something that, you know, it's something that happens on your phone when you use a little plug-in keyboard on your phone. Is like, congratulations, you've shortened up 2,000 words or whatever, 20,000 words or something. So it's not the express kind of expressly inherent like reward that it should be. So I've taken a lot of things off the table, right? I'm taking a lot of published adventures off the table. Yes. Oh, I won the dungeon dive. Sorry, Beacon. I feel for you. I died in the earlier one. So with that in mind, I think there are two different things that I would consider. Three different things. Are you getting warm, buddy? Let me take that. Hang on, I gotta tend to my dog. Is that better? All right. There are three different things that I would look at. So first and foremost, I would actually look at some of the adventure things on Adventures League, right? So I would look at some of the connected modules on Adventures League, and generally those adventures are designed to be 1 4-hour session and be loosely connected, right? So there may be a trilogy or something like that you could play. The quality varies. I would maybe look at what are some of the higher rated ones, but they generally like have a theme. Like, okay, so these 3 adventures lead you to the Frost Giant's Horn, and you get it and you find it or whatever it is, right? Now, they're a little rough around the edges in a lot of cases. Okay, that's fine. But it does give you like an adventure arc that you could play with. And they generally give you ideas for here's how to make a counter a little bit tougher, here's how to make it a little easier. You could sub in different rewards if you wanted to. But it gives you the basics of an adventure in a fairly digestible format. Usually includes most of the stats for the things, so you don't have to look them up in the monster manual. They're fairly affordable, and you don't have to worry about hacking them, right? The story is never so complicated that it's easy to edit some things out. It has a little. They try to have a little bit of everything in it. They try to have a little bit of combat. They try to have a little bit of role playing, not necessarily a ton. So you might have to embellish that a little bit. But you'll generally sort of get the adventure summary. Here's what's supposed to happen, and then kind of see how it plays out. And sometimes they'll give you 2 different paths. If they decide to follow the snow ridge line, these things happen, or it will say pick 3 random encounters from the following list and just use those, right? So it's very friendly for a new DM to sit down and absorb the information and understand what's supposed to happen, and then go back forward, go back and like play it and adjust it if you need to, but generally you might not need to do a whole lot of adjustment. The story maybe isn't as epic as running a hardback adventure, but you're probably not looking for that. And so they're but they're also, you can find three that are connected, or you can run them. You can find ones that are standalone that are highly rated. I would look to see which ones are fairly highly rated. But you have a variety of things, especially in that fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth level kind of power band to deal with. So I would look at those. MT Black is definitely somebody who's very prominent on DM's Guild, as Class Dunce points out, and interesting. Sorry, I just got a Twitter notice that they're tweeting about hashtag WotC staff. I'm not sure what that means. No, I don't know. The brawl. Great. So that MT Black is someone that you could look at. I downloaded that kind of like that highly rated cats adventure. I didn't feel like it suited my needs, but that's not a broad indictment of the stuff that MT Black puts together. So you could look at that, and that sort of brings me to my next point, which is you could look at the Wizards has the Guild Adept program of people that they found on DM's Guild that put together quality things and that they recommend. And I would say go through the reviews on those things and take a look at them and see if that's something that see which authors in that Guild Adept program really speak to you in terms of one-off adventures. So I'm definitely leading you toward find some one-off adventures that either you can connect together or you can just run as little standalone things. Don't worry about telling a big, broader, arcing story. Just try to have one adventure that goes a session or two, and and have it feel good, right? Like that's where you want to start off with. Don't worry about doing a whole campaign and executing that cleanly and brilliantly or whatever. It's not. That's not important yet. You gotta get your sea legs right before you start worrying about, well, what's the surprise twist payoff at the end of this particular 19 episode arc or whatever it is. So look at the Guild Adept program. I would say also one adventure that you should strongly consider is called the Adamantine Chef by Teos Abada. I'm going to slaughter Teos's last name, and he just tweeted here. Let me. I just bought it here because it was on sale, and I was like, let's get into it. But Adamantine Chef looks kind of like fun and goofy, nice change of pace, and I think your players might have fun with that if they're looking for something different. Yeah, that's what I want. Just go ahead and show it to me. It's cool. DM's Guild. I don't know. Sometimes it takes so long. Teos Abadia. Yeah. I'll put that in the chat here, shall we? And that has more of a humorous bent, right? And Teos is a great guy who's got a ton of experience running Adventurers League stuff, and I definitely trust him to put together a solid one-shot adventure. So I would definitely look at, it's like an Iron Chef type of thing with 5e, but it's also got kind of a lighthearted bent to it, and I think it looks promising. I wouldn't recommend it to you unless it looked promising. And I would say, I don't know what else Teos has on the DM's Guild. Let's click on his name and see what else it says here. So there's he's part of the DM's Guild Adept program, right? So he's written some other stuff, like the Artifact and the Howling Void. Pay attention to what levels those are for. And sometimes with the Adventurers League stuff, it's tied into whatever the hardback is. So you may feel like you're missing information. That's kind of the tricky thing. Teos worked on Vault of the Draco Lich. He's worked on a number of other things, right? But he's part of the DM's Guild Adept program, and I would definitely look at the stuff that he has. The third thing that I would recommend, the third and final thing that I would recommend is I don't trust a lot of third-party products, but I generally trust the stuff that comes out of Kobold Press. So if I were to look at 5e products that are going to have a minimum standard of execution and professionalism, I would look at Kobold Press. If you were running something like Shadow the Demon Lord, Rob Schwab is amazingly prolific, so I think you could check that out. But for specifically for 5e stuff, I would say look at the stuff that Kobold Press puts out. They also have this Warlock subscription magazine that they're doing, which might be worth investing in. I don't know if you're so inclined, but that's something that I've seen come across my Twitter feed that looks intriguing to me. And I use Tome of Beasts all the time. I love it. I backed the sequel Kickstarter to it. I just got my Midgard campaign setting and Midgard Players Heroes Handbook, and I'm excited to crack those open and take a look and see what the world is like. They always put together kind of like tougher monsters than you expect, so be forewarned that like it's D&D 5 that doesn't pull many punches, but I think they do a solid job of executing on the 5th edition rule set in a way that I don't know that I can vouch for everybody doing it that way. So those are my recommendations for you. I'm curious. You can always, if you have more questions or you have an issue or something comes up, you can always reach us on our Discord. You can join our Discord channel, and I check in. There's one channel specifically, one section set up specifically for disorganized play, where if people post an issue that they're having, I try and chime in and give my opinion, and also other people here in our Twitch community join in and participate and give some great advice back and forth. So if you have something that you've brought up and then you tried something and you want to follow up on it, that's a great place to go and get a follow-up question, right? So those are it's a great way to continue the conversation outside of just disorganized play. So I'd be happy to. I'm curious, I always like to hear actually in our Discord channel. I always like to hear feedback on, okay, I took your advice and here's what happened, or this didn't quite work out. What else could I do? But really, I like to hear like kind of like what the follow-up story is of like. And we had one recently. I was like, I'm running my first game this weekend. I hope it goes well. And I'm like, okay, well, here's my advice, but also tell us how it went. We want to know. Like that's the part for me that's satisfying. Answering the questions is interesting, and I'm happy to be a resource for the community. But I also want to hear your feedback and excitement and interest in how things went. Board thing. This is our last question that we're going to take today because we're starting to go over time here, but I appreciate everybody tuning in. Do you find that to GM a game based on a D&D game that is very focused on combat is different than a game like Vampire the Mage that has, I think that's Vampire the Masquerade, that has a lot of social options on it? Thomas W. Young, if you're going to try some other stuff, just quickly, I would say you could challenge yourself to try Dungeon World. And specifically, I would say challenge yourself to a game or to run an adventure called Servants of the Cinder Queen. Board thing. I'm thinking about your question. Don't worry. I've not forgotten you. I just wanted to. I talk about this adventure all the time, and I have yet to run it, but I want you all to know about it. It is $4. It's a $4 PDF, and it's designed for Dungeon World, and I think it has a really innovative format, and it's designed for kind of improvisational play, and I think it would be worth your time exploring. There's some fill in the blank type of stuff. You have to be prepared to be on your feet, but you might find some resources that'll help you fill in those blanks. But that would be my challenge to you. It would be to run Dungeon World and run Servants of the Cinder Queen, and if you're going to swap things up, see how that goes. Interesting proposition. I do find that D&D does get a little difficult to run when you just focus on the combat, right? Even though 5th edition runs fairly fast and lean, combat still does take a significant amount of time, right? I look at the fact that we have a 3-hour stream, and if I have a fight, that's for sure a third of it that's gone, maybe half of it that's gone. we we had a session on Saturday. Basically, the whole thing was a fight. And we do half an hour of kind of like intros, get the game up and running. Everybody gets in, starts kicking in their donations, and let's recap and introduce everybody. And all right, let's set the scene, and here's what's going to happen. And then we had kind of a half hour of like, here's what's coming up, next. And then we had 2 hours of a combat encounter. My issue with those things, as I've stated before, is that if your goal is to have a dramatic arc to your adventure, then you need to reveal information about the actors that are involved in the plot. You need to reveal clues that the party can follow that leads them to further information about what the true threat is. You need to reveal further information about who's actually behind the threat and how it's maybe a twist or whatever it is, etc. And the main issue with combat is that very rarely is much information revealed as the result of a combat. Unless you make a dedicated effort to have the people who are defeated in combat surrender and subject themselves to interrogation or confession or whatever it is, right? Unless you make a dedicated effort. But oftentimes, like D&D is just a battle to like which party beats the other party unconscious or dead. And when that happens, then you have to find a different way to introduce the information that you need to lead the players to the conclusions that the tools that they need in order to reveal, to get to the big climactic moment of like, oh, that means we need to go back down to the warehouse and confront whatever they've got locked in that box that they've submerged underneath the dock. Oh, we got to get the players to that at some point. You got to lead them to that, or get them to realize that conclusion. And combat generally doesn't do that. Whereas a game like Vampire the Masquerade, where you have leverage over people and you can do compulsions. I haven't played Vampire, so I'm not going to speak very deeply or intelligently about it. But those do give you more options for creating an ally or an asset out of somebody, for prompting them to divulge information that they don't want to divulge, etc. Right? So when I look at D&D, yeah, it is definitely different. And so I want to run it differently. I often want to run it differently than maybe it was designed. Well, certainly differently than it was designed to be run in 1980 or whatever, or 77 when it was invented. That's fine. Like, I would expect over the course of 40 plus years that the game should evolve and present different challenges and introduce somewhat of a different playstyle. There are still some core elements of D&D that are classic, that it wouldn't feel like D&D without hit points, without a magic missile spell, without rolling a d20. There are definitely some sacred cows, so to speak. But that doesn't mean that the game can't evolve around some of those core elements and become something else. So, yeah, I think I'll close on this thought, which is one of my personal goals for D&D combat going forward through the next 4 sessions, and also not all 4 sessions, but generally going forward, I would like to have my D&D session combat go where the arc that I would like to follow with these things, or the tactical goal that I have with these things, is to hit the players hard and fast up front in round 1, hit them a little less hard in round 2, and then rapidly tail off and kind of end the combat one way or the other by round 3. If you could have a 3-round combat, that's, like, to me, that's the ideal sweet spot for a juicy amount of action that's happening, and a juicy amount of drama that's happening, right? Get in, hit a peak, and then get out. So I think what that means is less hit points uh, for the monsters that are involved, but maybe more damage or being more brutal up front or including more environmental effects or what have you, right? But to me, my ideal goal, having run two really long combat sessions, the last, not this past session, but the two sessions before were both really long combat sessions. And I'm not saying there's not a place for a set piece combat. I think when we confront Xanathar, whenever that is, I think there will be a set piece combat. But in the meantime, as I'm trying to advance my storylines, I think combat should be 3 rounds and out. I'd like to try and tailor that to my goal. Whether that's, as BSB Care says, the leader surrenders at the end of round 3. A big adjustment to make in D&D. It really involves a changing of your mindset. The way that it's traditionally run is everyone fights until one party or the other reaches 0 hit points and they're unconscious, or you're ruled that they're dead. And it's very difficult. It's advice that's given over and over and over again. It's advice that I've had over and over and over again. But the NPCs, the monsters, the opponents want to survive as much as the players want to survive. As much as the players would be disappointed if they got killed, the monsters, most generally, unless they're insane or whatever, they should also be willing to. They should have the same drive to survive, right? And that's incredibly difficult advice to take. It has a whole bunch of implications, like what do we do with prisoners? Do we mercilessly slaughter them once they've given us the information that we want? Do we create some sort of binding contract that you won't attack us and you'll leave the dungeon and you won't cause more trouble and they're chaotic evil and you can't trust them, but we're trying to do the best that we can? Like, there's a whole bunch of other implications that come up that are not so neat and tidy as he's dead, you find his journal. But I think if you want to get to a 3-round combat, that's definitely, as BSB Care points out, that's a tool in your tool bag. Is this guy wants to live. He wants to go on to have some sort of life, even if he has to promise that he's not going to do the same thing. And so at the end of round 3, he goes, he looks around and he realizes he's used, his three big spells, and half of his lackeys are toast, and this thing is turning, and he doesn't think he has a good chance of getting away, and he surrenders. Okay. All right, I surrender. It's hard to use it all the time, right? But it's something you should try to use a couple times and see what happens and how it challenges you. Storyteller for Hire, thank you for hosting us here today. Somebody said, okay. Kirby says, I think my DM has the same mindset. They threw our level 13 PC against an ancient white dragon and played the dragon stupid, but it was still scary. Sure. I mean, you can always dumb down the monster a little bit too, right? That's one thing. I don't know. The thing is, like a 3-round combat. 3-round combat at level 13, it goes one of two ways. Either it goes 3 rounds because the party has absolutely obliterated whatever opposition you have faced, or it turns into an 8-round combat. And it's a much tougher challenge than they think. But it's hard to challenge a level 13 party. Once you get past level 10, I think in 5e, it becomes a whole different game. It really gets it's really getting tricky. I don't know that the Froggy Moth is going to be a big set piece combat. I think it is definitely one of those times where you can have a 3-round combat where it hits hard up front and it causes some problems. That might be a 5-round combat. I don't know. It just depends. Some of it depends upon how many different forces you have arrayed against the party, right? So one of the reasons that our combat on Saturday went so long was there was literally 17 different opponents on the board, right? I know because the way that we had things set up for the stream, you weren't able to see the battle map, but there were 17 bots or droids on the board who were fighting the party. And so it's a matter of, even when my turn comes around, now I have to move these 17 things. And even if only 6 of them are involved in the fighting, that's 6 attacks that they have to make. Boom, boom, boom. They miss, and each one decides, what do you want to do, and all that kind of stuff, right? So with the Froggemoth, it's not quite as onerous because it's the party and it's one monster, and that one monster is probably going to grapple, bite, swallow, grapple. The options are much less limited than if you have to do the ballet of moving 17 pieces around and deciding how they're logically going to respond to a bunch of this stuff, right? Storyteller for Hire, I think an 18th level game is interesting. I'm personally playing in a game where we just reached level 24. We started as level 21 or 22, and we're now level 24. It's weird. That's what I will tell you. You are incredibly competent at a few things, and you are not particularly competent at several other key areas. My sorcerer has a 24 charisma or something like that, and can shoot 4 radiant eldritch bolts that in one particular encounter hit for a minimum of like 23 points of damage apiece. So you can crank out like 100 points of damage around if he hits with all of his bolts. He's got a dexterity of 14 and has a +2 to an initiative. No, +1 to initiative and +2 to initiative and a +2 on his dex saving throws. It's miserable. So the game gets a little weird once you get past level 12, I would say. 10, 12, everything's all sort of balanced and well-rounded. And then after that, you rapidly develop extreme competence at one thing and then glaring holes in the lineup at other things. So that's tough. As Richard McSundy points out, there are some intelligent monsters that have a death wish. It's not an answer that leads itself to one particular solution or another, right? But there are those insane cultists and whatnot who are just going to frenzy fight to death, and that's fine to have those monsters that do that still in the traditional D&D approach, right? But I would say if you're going to have that kind of monster, then scale back their hit points, right? If they normally have 75, give them 50 or something like that. There are some other cheats that you can use if you really want to get a little metagamey about it, where you just decide that they're going to die on level 3, and whoever hits them does that. Whoever hits them next does the killer blow. I would caution you about that, because then it feels you rapidly kind of go into like fudge territory of like, oh well, that's what, this person, the monk has not scored a victory in a while. I'm gonna let them do the killing blow, and the monk's turn comes around, and through the fickle fate of dice, they completely whiff on all 3 attacks, and you go, oh well, this is going another round. So it is a tool in your toolbox. It's a dangerous one to deploy. I've used it. I've kind of backed away from it. But I roll in front of the screen. What I don't do is I track hit points in front of the players, but I always track hit points as a cumulative amount of damage, right? So the players can see, oh, okay, so far we've done 56 points of damage to this guy. They don't know what the hit point maximum is, right? So rather than starting at like 90 and counting down, I would start from 0 and count up to the amount of damage that the creature has taken. And that way, that allows me to have a little bit, like, keep some mystery. Even though I'm not using a DM screen, and even though I'm rolling in the open, it allows me to keep some mystery about how tough is this guy? How much health does this guy have? Maybe in an upcoming Disorganized play, we'll talk about ways to address the okay, how much gas does this guy have left kind of issue. Because that's something that often comes up. Is like, does he look bloodied or da 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 da, right? Um, yeah, as Richard McSundy points out, in the monster manual, they're just giving you the average, right? Like, there's a minimum that the monster should have according to the hit dice and the con bonus. But what's stated in the book is the average. It's not the max and it's not the minimum. So you have a range there, um, and yes, you can have lower hit points for monsters. It's in the rules. You're not cheating by adjusting that hit point total down. And sometimes when I can't decide, when it seems like it's a really climactic moment, but I know that that monster has been tough and it only has 2 hit points left, sometimes I'll just let a little roll of the dice. Like, okay, low means he has lower than average hit points, and high means he has whatever I've decided, whatever I've written down in my notes is his amount of hit points, or however you want to divvy it up. But I'll let the dice decide. Like, oh, he only has 2 hit points left. Do I want to go through the rigmarole of trying to get somebody to kill this guy over 2 hit points? It's not very dramatic at this moment. Let's let the dice decide. Okay, who cares? Like, he's dead. So there are ways to fine tune that, but I don't know. That's a long diversion on is combat is combat better than a social game? I think the important part is that you're trying to tell a narratively interesting and engaging story, and combat often gets in the way of that. So let's find some ways, some solutions to make combat either pay off narratively. Okay, you let me go and I'll tell you what I know. It's a classic surrender move, right? But that's a better way to have a monster surrender than just go, okay, I surrender. Oh, okay, well, you're on our terms. And in fact, if a monster surrenders with 40 hit points out of 80, they're actually in a better position to barter with the party than if they get knocked unconscious, they wake up tied up, and they go, okay, well, I want a parley. Well, you've got no leverage. So, all interesting things to consider and think about in our mutual crafting of an enjoyable story. That's ultimately what we're looking for, and that's not ultimately what D&D was initially designed for. And that's not a strike against the game. The way it was initially designed was incredibly addictive and appealing, and it happened to have this component that you could include an engaging storytelling element. But it was designed off of a war game, and it has war game roots. So let's acknowledge what it was, and let's work hard on making it something better that it could be. That's my speech. I think it's a good guiding goal, especially when it comes to D&D, right? All right. So if we take a look at Van Calendar tonight, hey, do what you like tonight. We don't have any shows. We're gonna kind of leave Thursday blank. Let's not fight the 800-pound gorilla of Critical Role, and also Dom. Honestly, like, he's doing this job for literally no money and literally a lot of time. So let's give Dom a night off. So there's that as well. And also, we also need some just like pre-prod time in the studio where we could either shoot other projects, do other things, shoot promos, that sort of stuff, right? So that's that. Yeah. According to Dom, apparently this season of Critical Role is actually good. So nothing tonight. Tomorrow night is another installment of Wildcards. So tune in for the continuing adventures in our weird Wild West. That's tomorrow night at 8 o'clock. And then on Sunday, we've got nothing on Sunday. Is that correct, Dom? Or am I right about that? I'm not casting any judgment on Critical Role. Honestly, by the time it sort of hit my radar, there were so many hours of it. I was like, I can't keep up with this. I've tuned in for maybe 2 episodes of Critical Role, and it seems fun, and they've got a great crew over there. I had the it's not the Kickstarter preview is not on the calendar is the question. I had the misfortune of tuning in for the Kraken episode where the Critical Role crew fought that Kraken battle that went way over time, where it was literally like 11:30 at night when they finally finished up, and I was like, "What's this? Seems miserable." So that was just a strange coincidence. I'm very happy that they have brought so many people into the hobby, and I am incredibly proud of them for all that they have accomplished. So no, I'm not dissing Critical Role in any serious kind of way. Uh, that night was, yeah, it was particular. It was all just particularly weird that night that I tuned in. So I'm well aware that that's not representative of what usually goes on. That being said, I have enough trouble keeping up with the stream that I personally run that it's difficult for me to tune in. If anything, I wish that I had more time to tune in to Adam Cable's either games or his GM advice shows. That's someplace that I would also look, right? So and that's the thing. Like Critical Role has brought a ton of people into the hobby, and I'm tremendously grateful for them generating so much interest. So did Flamencoole have a question? Oh, I find it tough to keep my players happy when one loves role playing and story while another is all about the numbers. Any advice? I don't have time to tackle that question right now. You can either drop it in our Discord or I'll talk about it next Thursday here on Disorganized Play, or we'll talk about a little bit. Let's make a mental note: role playing story gamers versus numbers guys. I think the trick there is to try to find a little bit of balance between the two. Yeah. So that's that. Yeah, I said it jokingly. I'm glad that you're all here aboard. They do a great job of showing why D&D is so much fun. So it's tough for me to invest more time in a hobby that I actually also have another career that I'm trying to pursue. So that's that. But yes, drop it in our Discord, and we can have people weigh in. If we do, oh, yeah, all right. Thanks, DJ Regular, for dropping that link. You can drop it in our Discord, or I'll bring it up next week. We can talk about it next Thursday here on Disorganized Play. Tuesday will be a prep stream. So Sunday, Kickstarter. We're doing a Kickstarter preview. I don't remember what game. Did Dom answer what game? DJ David Crennan is going to be previewing a new Kickstarter game on Hexplore It. That's right, Hexplore It. I forgot about that. Yeah. So that's Sunday, I assume at 5 o'clock. Monday, I'm really excited about this. Megan Caves is going to be GMing for like the second time ever. And she's starting a 3-game mini arc of a game called Mysterium. I have it on the shelf behind me somewhere amidst the detritus, as they say. And I love Mysterium. If you've never played the board game, it's fantastic. One player is the ghost. They are not allowed to say anything. They have a list. If you've ever played Dixit, they have a series of cards that are supposed to indicate or suggest certain things to certain players. And ultimately, at the end of it, you're trying to get the 6 people or the however many people are at the table who are still living to figure out which one of them murdered the ghost. And it's fantastic. It's a fantastic game. If you haven't played it, I highly recommend it as a board game. Certainly not for first-time gamers, but if you are kind of tired of your Catan and whatnot, I really recommend. Or if you've played Dixit, I really recommend that you try Mysterium. It's fantastic. So that's that. But Megan is starting a 3-arc RPG campaign based off of Mysterium, and I'm very curious to see how that's going to play out. I think that's an awesome concept for certainly for a mini arc of a campaign. So she's done a ton of research and ton of work on it, and I'm sure she's going to probably come into it way more prepared than I would be or I am on a week-to-week basis. So that should that's something you should definitely tune in for. Tuesday, I'm back here with Disorganized Play. Tuesday night, we continue the League of Adventure. If you missed the inaugural episode of that, which was this week, you can go back and watch that on our VOD. So tune in for the League of Adventure on Tuesday, and then next Wednesday, of course, is the Iron Keep. So that's kind of a wrap around here on what's coming up in the next week of Saving Throw Show. Thank you so much to Farquad and DJ Regular and BSB Care and all of our mods who help keep the channel safe, friendly, clean, and accessible today, and also last night. I neglected to thank you, so appreciate your hard-earned efforts. Special bonus props to DJ Regular for being the clips master. If you want to join our Discord channel, there's no better reason than to go into the clips channel and see all of the various moments and highlights that DJ Regular has clipped. It's a great way to just sort of like have a little taster sampler of each of our shows. So check those things out. Very good. Thanks to everyone who supports us, either subbing up or making a financial donation during our shows, or if you're a Patreon backer, once again, I just added a new handout to the Iron Keep folder for our Patreon backers. You can download the crew manifest that was unlocked during last night's show that Garav got, and we didn't really have a chance to share either on camera or in the stream. You've got that handout available to you to check out, enjoy, indulge, take a look over. So that's that. Thanks to Dom for sitting in and helping me out with some of the facts and figures as far as what's running with the channel. We got some exciting things coming up. I'm looking forward to these last 4 sessions. I feel like this was a big milestone last night of like get some stuff out there, and now let's push and try and get the players into a position where they feel like they have the tools to do what they need to do, and they just need to overcome the obstacles that are facing them for that. So until next time, I'm your which DM am I? I'm your dungeon bastard is what I am. I hope you all have a great weekend. Thank you so much for the questions, a great round of discussion today. You can keep the discussion going over on our Discord channel. And until next time, let's dungeon. And then I just leisurely go over. And I tap this button right here. Which button? I don't remember. That button. Oh for 1. Oh for 1.